Al Gore was in Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum, where he went into complete meltdown mode, warning about the dangers of climate change.
Look, it's so funny. Al Gore is upset because climate change is gonna lead to absolutely catastrophic, horrendous situations for everybody on the planet to deal with. Isn't this hilarious?
The accumulated amount is now trapping as much extra heat as would be released by 600,000 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs exploding every single day on the Earth. That's what's boiling the oceans, creating these atmospheric rivers and the rain bombs, and sucking the moisture out of the land and creating the droughts and melting the ice and raising the sea level and causing these waves of climate refugees predicted to reach 1 billion in this century. Look at the xenophobia and political authoritarian trends that have come from just a few million refugees. What about 1 billion?
Guy, do you think that he rehearsed that speech on his private jet, gobbling up fossil ozone on the way to the forum?
I mean, it's a superficial point, but it's one that should be made every time. Watching the clips from him that we just played, and then some of the sound bites yesterday that you guys talked about on the couch with John Kerry, I'm just having flashbacks and thinking the American people really dodged a few bullets in 2000 and 2004 narrowly.
But Harris, I don't think that's a superficial point at all, Guy. I think that's actually a main point, which is that economic forum, the amount of private jets used up the same as 350,000 gas-powered vehicles in the same time frame, just 1 week.
Yes.
And these are the ones that are lecturing us every day and screaming in our faces, practice what you preach, hold it on Zoom.
I don't think it sounds like fun being trapped on a plane with Al Gore yelling at me about why he gets to fly and I don't.
So that Fox News clip was deeply unhinged for a litany of reasons, but there is an element of truth to what they were saying, and so we're gonna break it down, just the sheer hypocrisy. Now, first and foremost, they're making fun of Al Gore being upset about climate change, and that just is on its face ridiculous. Like, quite literally, these people are basically operating under the assumption that they are rich enough that they won't have to change their lifestyle anytime soon as a result of climate change. They'll just push for more military and police spending to make sure that refugees from around the world are not allowed to come to the United States, while also stealing wealth from all over the world to maintain their quality of life as the climate gradually destroys an increasing segment of the human population. But then it goes to their slightly correct criticism of people like Al Gore, because Al Gore, on some level, believes in the same thing. Because the reality is, people in these positions of power that these Republicans are pointing to say, oh, ask Joe Manchin, ha ha ha, these Democrats aren't really going to do anything about climate change.
Al Gore commenting against coal reminds me of Hillary Clinton in 2016 saying, I'm going to shut down the coal industry. I want Joe Manchin to answer that question. I'd like any Democrat in authority in West Virginia to answer that question. Pennsylvania, perhaps. John Fetterman, let's hear from you.
Is just literally true. The biggest polluter in the United States of America is the military-industrial complex. Not to mention all of the secondary results of us using sweatshops around the world as a result of our violent imperialism stealing wealth. And then, of course, there's just the reality that there's systemic nature of the things like car-centric development, the huge amount of money from the oil and gas lobby to maintain car-centric development, and all of these other factors that Democrats are really unwilling to address, which are the main causes of climate change. But the hypocrisy that they point to with Al Gore regarding his personal consumption habits are all really a distraction. They're meant to distract you from the reality that is that individual choices are not going to make a difference. Fundamentally, the problems that we have are systemic in nature. You can't make an individual choice that changes the supply lines of what goes onto your grocery store shelf or your retail store shelf. You can't change the supply lines for the clothes that you buy. And you definitely can't change the fact that in countless places across the country, you literally just need a car in order to get from A to B. These are systemic problems that are created by these larger systems where the people in power are fundamentally unwilling to change them. And yes, that includes people like Joe Biden. Because while they push things like electric vehicles, that fundamentally will not work. Because even if everybody tomorrow was using an electric vehicle, we would still be causing climate change through our supply lines, through the military-industrial complex, through the sheer amount of oil that is required to make asphalt for pavement, to to build roads, fundamentally, at the end of the day, unless we have drastic, radical changes, nothing is really going to get better. And the only country that is actually taking climate change seriously is China. Because what is China doing? China is not just reducing their consumption of carbon-emitting fuels. China's primary strategy is actually reducing demand for carbon-emitting fuels. They're investing a ridiculous amount of money into high-speed rail to make sure that people have options that aren't cars. They're building their cities in such a way that they're incredibly walkable with lots of public transit. And they are rapidly expanding their use of renewable energies. Quite literally, they are the world leader in renewable energy for a reason. Rather than a strategy of just going in and trying to artificially suppress the consumption of oil and gas, they are trying to reduce the overall demand for fossil fuels by eliminating structural components that require the use of fossil fuels and by expanding their use of renewable energies so that there's lower demand for fossil fuels. That is why China is so far and ahead the rest of the world when it comes to actually planning for and responding to climate change. Whereas in the United States, we are trying all of these schemes like, oh, what if we did carbon capture? Oh, what if we did cap and trade? And all of these market-based incentives that fundamentally don't work because the oil and gas lobby is still being subsidized, and it's being heavily subsidized. We are actively incentivizing the use of oil and gas, and we are not putting anywhere near enough money into renewable energies, which is what we fundamentally need to do to reduce demand. And not only that, but we also need to completely end suburban development. The unfortunate reality is that suburban development is by far the worst impact on the environment that exists within the United States of America. It turns out that all of the resources that are necessary to maintain the infrastructure, that is to say, all of the sewer systems, all of the electric grids throughout the areas, all of the pavement for the roads, all of those things require a ridiculous amount of per capita fossil fuels to maintain that is fundamentally not sustainable. Quite literally, there is no future where we solve climate change and keep suburbs the way they are. Because suburban development and car-centric development more broadly is what is causing this problem. And it's not something you can just make an individual choice around. It is a systemic change that we need to make. So when these Fox News people point out the hypocrisy of the Democrats, on one level, they're being truthful, that the Democrats are not willing to make the systemic changes that are necessary to respond to climate change. But the reason that the Republicans are pointing out this hypocrisy is not because they actually want to do anything about climate change. It's because they want to do nothing about climate change. They want to say, hey, you don't care about poor people either. You don't care about the global south either. So stop pretending that you care about the global south, because we stopped pretending to care about poor people, and we stopped pretending to care about the global south, and we're doing great. And that really is the difference between the neoliberal Democrats and the fascist Republicans. Fascists are pretty overt about the fact that they don't care how many people die as a result of their policy decisions, where the neoliberals use pretense as an excuse to say, well, we tried to help people, but it just didn't work, even though the methods that they're trying are bound to fail in the first place. And so really, Republicans making fun of Al Gore for being upset is deeply sickening, not because Al Gore is a fundamentally good person that they're making fun of, but because they don't even bother to have the pretense about caring about the planet. They don't even care to have the mask on and pretend to care about other people. They're just full-blown accelerationists.